All right, folks, here on the show, we are taking a look at 25 players who could be salary cap casualties this offseason. So, Tom, let's get into it, my man. We'll start off with one Mike Glennon. Boy, we thought this guy was going to be the franchise of the Bears, huh?
No, we didn't.
Oh, I did at least.
I didn't. I didn't think Mike Glennon was all that good. Look, he's tall and he's got a decent arm, but his numbers were not great for the Bears, and it's very clear that Trubisky is their long-term answer. I thought it was a little weird that they drafted Trubisky after signing Glennon, but whatever. We now sit here. He has a roster bonus coming up on March 16th, the start of the new year. $2.5 million, it's guaranteed. They're not going to pick that up. There's no way, and they can save $11.5 million by cutting him. They can use all of that in free agency. Mike Glennon's not going to be back with Chicago. They're not going to pay $16 million for him to be a backup quarterback. That just doesn't make any sense for Chicago. He will be gone, and I am curious to see where he ends up at, because maybe he ends up somewhere else in the NFL. Maybe he ends up as a backup. I think Glennon's a nice backup, but he's not your franchise option. So Glennon, he's gone.
So the Chicago Bears, of course, they had the sights set on Mike Glennon last offseason. They signed him. They thought he was going to be the answer as the quarterback. He did not last very long. In comes Mitchell Trubisky, and it's clear that Trubisky is the future of that Chicago Bears franchise. So there is Mike Glennon as top player to be cut. Number one on the list here. Let's get into...
No particular order outside of positionals.
Correct, yes. So let's get into another quarterback here. Tyrod Taylor of the Buffalo Bills. Bills fans are done with him, it seems.
Yeah, the Bills in general seem to not really want Tyrod Taylor anymore, which I don't know if I actually agree with, but that seems to be the route that they want to go. He's got an $18 million cap hit coming up this year. He has a $6 million roster bonus that's also due on March 16th, the start of the new league year. You'll see that date quite a bit throughout today's show. So they're going to have to make that decision by March 16th. If they don't cut him, then they're going to keep him. And I think what you'll see is you can save $15 million by making him a post-June 1st coach. It's kind of one of those money-moving deals. What happens was when you're cut, all the money you've guaranteed gets pushed up into this year in terms of the cap hit, but making post-June 1st, you can spread it over 2 years. So that's kind of the money behind that. But 9.4 if he's cut right away, 15 if he's cut after June 1st or designated as a post-June 1st cut. The Bills will try to trade him. I don't know if they're going to find a taker. And if they can't find a taker, I think they cut him.
I don't think so either.
And then I think they look into trading up in the draft to go get their new quarterback.
All right, so there's Tyrod Taylor as a player to be cut, perhaps this 2018 NFL offseason. Let's go to the running back position here. Doug Martin of the Buccaneers. It just hasn't worked ever since that glorious campaign a couple of years ago.
He has these moments of, oh, he looks like the old Doug Martin. And it's like, oh, wait, he's actually not good at all. And he had an under 4 yards per carry average, had a couple TDs.
Historically bad.
Look, he has a $6.75 million cap hit. That's a lot for any running back, especially one who hasn't played that well. Doug Martin will not be back with Tampa Bay. I'll be stunned if he's not cut. They can save all of that by cutting him because his contract guarantees were voided because he had his suspension. Martin will not be back as the Bucs running back. They'll look elsewhere in the draft or free agency. Martin will be elsewhere in the NFL. There's just no way that he comes back.
All right, so there's Doug Martin there. And by the way, we all thought Dirk Cutter, there's no way he was going back. But looks like he's staying.
Don't remind me.
There you go. Doug Martin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers perhaps getting cut this offseason. Let's take a look at the next running back on our list, Adrian Peterson. This makes a lot of sense here, Tom.
Look, there's already a report that he's going to be cut, and it just makes so much sense. He has a $2.8 million cap hit. The Cardinals can save all of that. And why would you bring him back? Like, you just simply don't need him. David Johnson's going to come back. There's a roster bonus due also on March 16th for just under $1 million. David Johnson's back. Adrian Peterson wants to be the focal back. He's not going to be.
So he's going to bring a lot of drama.
He's not going to be out in Arizona. You just cut him and say, hey, thanks for stopping by. We tried to make a late run in the playoffs with you. It didn't quite work out, but best of luck in the NFL. If you need a good reference, let us know.
Exactly.
And you
hit us up on LinkedIn.
Say bye, yeah.
So Adrian Peterson there, likely gone for the Arizona Cardinals, a team that needs to create salary cap relief to make a run at things at the quarterback position in free agency, which I expect will happen from Arizona. Let's get into the next running back here, Chris Ivory of the Jacksonville Jaguars. What do you make of him?
He is so gone, I'm surprised he hasn't already been cut. When you have a nearly $7 million cap hit, all but $1 million of which can be signed by cutting you, and you were inactive down the stretch, you're not coming back. And that's happened with Chris Ivory. He had some work when Fournette was hurt, and then kind of late in the year, TJ Yeldon totally usurped him, and the Jags didn't want Ivory even active on the roster because he brings no special team value. and he's not going to come back. There's no way you pay $7 million almost to a backup halfback.
Unbelievable.
That makes no sense. Ivory will not be back with the Jaguars. He's going to be cut. And quick mention here, we picked up we tried to juggle guys who could be cut, some of the bigger names, and maybe a bit lesser names who are going to be cut. Had to trim down quite a few names. Ivory's one of those guys who will not be back in Jacksonville. He's going to get cut.
And if the Jaguars are to franchise tag Allen Robinson, which won't be cheap, they're going to have to create some salary cap space. Chris Ivory, one avenue to actually make that happen. Let's go into another running back here. This one coming out of Nashville, DeMarco Murray of the Tennessee Titans. I talked about him on my show this morning, Tom. He is surely gone.
$6.5 million cap hit, and frankly, Derrick Henry looks like the better back right now.
Time to put him in.
And if that's the case, why would you pay $6.5 million to a secondary back on your roster? The Titans will let DeMarco Murray go. He can still play in the NFL, but not at a $6.5 million cap hit. That just doesn't make any sense. All of which, by the way, can indeed be saved. I agree with you, which you won't always agree with as we go through these guys here, but I agree with you. DeMarco's not going back to Tennessee at that price.
And I think the Titans also will go to the draft, maybe third, fourth, fifth rounds, and look at an Akram Wadley or somebody like that, and perhaps bring in a running back at a rotational role.
Get a third down back who can fit better with Derrick Henry. DeMarco can work out of the backfield, but it just doesn't make sense at a $6.5 million cap hit. By the way, $250,000 due as a roster bonus on March 18th. He's not going to make it to that day. If you're going to cut a guy, there's no reason to pay him as roster bonus and then say, oh, just kidding, we're going to cut you anyway. So
they'll probably have their mind made up before the new league year begins. So there's DeMarco Murray. Let's go from one Murray to another. This one, LATAVIUS Murray, running back for the Vikings with Dalvin Cook coming back. Perhaps they re-sign Jerick McKinnon, who's going to be a free agent as well. Murray could be on the chopping block.
Every one of these halfbacks outside of Adrian Peterson fit the same category. Over $6 million due in a cap hit, was signed to be his team's original starter, and is now no longer a starting running back. And that's where we sit with LATAVIUS Murray. He is exactly who he's been every year he's been in the NFL. 4 yards a carry and a red zone touchdown.
Nothing flashy.
Plain and simple. That's exactly who LATAVIUS Murray is. You're not going to pay that guy $6.35 million. You can find that level of production if you give him 216 carries at a lot of different spots in the NFL draft. So Murray will not be back at that price. You can save over $5 million by cutting him, and you got Dalvin Cook coming in. And Dalvin Cook is ready to be your featured back. I love him as a player. It doesn't make much sense for the Vikings to keep Murray at that price tag. He's gonna get cut.
All right, so there's LATAVIUS Murray, our last running back off the board here as we transition to the outside and look at the wide receivers here. And we'll start things off with Jeremy Maclin. Tom, this makes so much sense from a personnel standpoint. Yes, there's that $7.5 million cap hit that he has. And, you know, it's not a daunting number, but the Ravens are strapped for salary cap space right now. Joe Flacco was never on pace with Maclin, and Maclin was hurt much of the season as well. So the Ravens likely to let go of him, I think.
So another example of a guy that we'll know before the free agency starts, because he has a $1 million roster bonus due on March 16th, the start of the new league year. 7.5 is a very high cap hit, and he did not produce that well for Baltimore. But Cam, with that said, it's not like Baltimore has a lot of other great options to play with.
Sure.
Maclin might actually be the best of the bunch because they're all really bad.
He is the best of the bunch. There's no doubt about that. But the Ravens also have to create that relief if they want to go and make a run at things for one Jarvis Landry or somebody around that kind of realm. And the Ravens, of course, have that cap hit from Joe Flacco as well. That doesn't make batters very enticing for Ravens players and the Ravens front office to kind of look elsewhere and help make Joe Flacco's core around him better. But Jeremy Maclin, I think, is good as gone. There was just never any chemistry there. And he's a wide receiver number 2 at the end of the day, not a wide receiver number 1.
Yeah, I think you can say $5 million. You're not going to be able to get a great receiver, I don't think, in the free agency at that price tag. But it can help you afford a bigger name.
All right.
Which, by the way, the free agency crop right now isn't that great for receivers. But as you go through these list of names, there are a lot of really good receivers who could then end up getting cut.
Absolutely. Including this guy, Randall Cobb, wide receiver for the Packers. So the situation with Green Bay, folks, they're going to have to cut one of these guys, I think, from a monetary perspective, Randall Cobb or Jordy Nelson. We'll start things off with Randall here, Tom. Really disappointing last year.
He has had he's had rough times at different points over the years, and he and the guy we'll get to later are in similar situations. He is in the last year of his contract. He's 27 years old, has a $12.7 million cap hit, That does not remotely match up with the production that Cobb put up. Now, again, a big factor was not having Aaron Rodgers because Brett Hundley was not very good. So that does help explain a little bit of the production decrease, but you can save almost $9.5 million. That's a lot of money to save for a guy like Cobb, who you might not be able to get a guy of his caliber. You can get very similar production at a lower rate. And that's what we're going through as we go through these guys. The production doesn't match up with the money they're going to have to be paid next year.
Return on investment, certainly not there right now for Randall Cobb. Let's go to another Green Bay Packer at the wide receiver position. I mentioned him, Jordy Nelson, and 32 years old and struggling to get separation and perhaps headed to the slot. You know, it's all stacking up for him to get cut.
The numbers weren't all that dissimilar from Cobb, more touchdowns from Nelson, and we know that Aaron Rodgers likes him a lot. The production in years past with Jordy Nelson has been top-notch, but he is 32 years old. He is in the last year of his contract, a $12.5 million cap hit. You save more by cutting Nelson than you save by cutting Randall Cobb, which I think is very important because Cam, with the extension to Davante Adams, I expect you'll see Green Bay cut one of these receivers. The question is, who is it going to end up being?
So Green Bay with a situation where they have to free up some space to make something happen. And look, it's going to be Jordy, it's going to be Cobb, as we have a reaction poll for the folks at home. Who will it be, or will it be both or neither? So everybody throw in your respective votes. Jordy Nelson, give us a heart. The Packers cut him. Randall Cobb, give us a like. Neither is a wow face. Both is actually a laughing face. I'd be shocked about the last one.
That's why it's laughing.
Yeah, okay, fair.
Because they're not going to cut both of them.
What do you think?
Who should they cut or who will they cut? Because I think actually my answer is the same.
Okay, there you go.
You should cut Jordy Nelson.
Yeah, I agree.
You can save more money and he's older. Like,
right.
I know that Nelson is a better outside receiver, but he's 32 years old. I don't want to pay that guy $12.5 million given how poorly he played kind of down the stretch last year. I don't love the way Randall Cobb has played either, but I do think if you have to pick one of them, you cut the older guy. That saves you more money, even if it's only like an extra $500,000. That does matter in the end. So I say you cut Jordy Nelson, but it's not a easy decision to make there for me.
It's certainly not, and Green Bay certainly has to make a few decisions, and who knows, Clay Matthews could be on the chopping block. There's a lot of salary cap relief related to him as well. So, folks, throw in your thoughts here on NFL Daily, and we will track what you put through. Let's take a look at our summary to this point for top players who could be cut this NFL offseason. We've got Mike Glennon, quarterback for the Bears, Tyrod Taylor, quarterback for the Bills, Doug Martin, running back for the Buccaneers, Adrian Peterson, RB for the Cards, and Chris Ivory, running back for the Jaguars. Next slate here, DeMarco Murray of the Titans, Latavius Murray of the Vikings, Jeremy Maclin of the Ravens, and a couple of Packers wide receivers, Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson.
Not all these players will end up being cut, but I do think you'll see that most, or at least some of these guys will be cut here. And then when it comes to Nelson and Cobb, one of those two is going to end up being cut by the Packers.
All right, so there you go. We're continuing on with top players who could be cut here today on NFL Daily, presented by Mizzen and Main. Let's take a look at Emmanuel Sanders now of the Denver Broncos.
I've always liked him to lead things off, but he missed time this year with injuries. Up until this year, he had several straight years of 76-plus catches, 1,000 yards, and 5 TDs. Great numbers for a guy like Sanders, but this year has a $10.9 million cap hit, 5.56 of which can be saved if he's cut, 8.25 of which can be saved if it's post 6-1, which you mentioned is the after June 1st cut date there. The Broncos are openly trying to trade Sanders. They've shopped him around, and surprise, surprise, NFL teams don't want a 30-year-old receiver, soon to be 31-year-old receiver, with a $10.9 million cap hit that didn't put up 50 catches or 600 yards.
That's not enticing? Oh.
But if he is cut, which I would not be surprised, because we'll discuss Denver here in more depth in a minute, he will draw interest. One team to monitor, Cam, the Dallas Cowboys.
Ooh.
Sanders is from North Texas.
Okay. All right, keep that one in mind as we take a look at Emmanuel Sanders. Let's take a look at Demaryius Thomas now, from one Bronco to another as a potential cap cut. What do you make of Demaryius? You called him the Dez Bryant of the AFC. Is that what it was?
I called him the Dez Bryant of the Denver Broncos, although he did have more yards, more receptions, and all that. But there's some similarities here because Demaryius Thomas has had 5 straight years of 1,000-plus yards, but it has now dropped for 3 consecutive seasons, which is not what you want to see. He also, by the way, is now on the wrong side of 30. Has a $12 million cap hit, and his contract is also super weird. So He has a $4 million option, which is due on the last day of this current league year, which is actually in March.
Yep.
Because the league year isn't the same as the calendar year, it extends it into March. That it eventually says, okay, kind of like says, we're going to keep you for the last 2 years. And if the option is not picked up, the final 2 years of the contract will void. And it only ends up being a little over $3 million in current dead money, so it's really complicated. But in the end, if they cut him, they would likely end up saving about $10 million of that cap hit. That's a lot of money for a guy who wasn't the same player the Broncos fans are used to. I understand there's a chance. So I think Denver is in the exact same spot that Green Bay is in, especially if they want to throw money at Kirk Cousins, which they seem to want to do. And if that's the case, and we'll bring up a reaction poll here as well, Denver's got to cut one of those receivers. If so, who should they end up cutting, Cam?
That's right. As we have the options here for you, heart for Thomas, like for Sanders, wow face for neither, and a laughing face for both. I think Demaryius Thomas is as reliable as they come. Okay. So I am going to say Emmanuel Sanders should probably get cut.
I say this is the host of the Cowboys Report.
This is hard, though.
Denver should cut Emmanuel Sanders, and the Cowboys should go sign him. But in all actuality, I am a huge fan of what Emmanuel Sanders brings to you on the roster. I think he's wildly underrated. I don't think he's that far behind Demaryius Thomas as an actual player. I think he can actually do more for you as a receiver because Demaryius Thomas can be a little bit limited, but when he does make plays, they're incredible plays. But I think Sanders is the NFL's perfect number 2 wide receiver, and for many teams, that is actually a number 1 wide receiver. So, but you don't save quite as much money with Sanders, but I think you want Demaryius Thomas to still be your number 1 guy. He's a little bit younger, but not that much younger. So I say you end up cutting Emmanuel Sanders. You make him post June 1st. You save almost just over $8 million there.
You know,
but it's a tough call for me.
Denver leadership should work the back channels with Kirk Cousins' camp and ask him, which wide receiver should we cut, Kirk? Who do you prefer?
There you go.
All right.
Now you're thinking.
I'm thinking Kirk prefers Demaryius Thomas, that big physical wide receiver there, somebody that really he hasn't had the services of in his career, perhaps Pierre Garçon if you really want to stretch it. All right, so talking about Sanders and Demaryius Thomas out of Denver as perhaps potential salary cap cuts this NFL offseason, let's get into another name at wide receiver, Michael Crabtree. New regime there in the Bay Area with Chucky in town. Tom, a lot of things could go down out of there.
There was a report earlier in the offseason that said Crabtree is gone this offseason, and it does seem to make a lot of sense because there's a $7.69 million cap hit in 2018, and they can save all of that by cutting him. And I think fair or not that Crabtree has maybe a bit of a reputation of being a bit of a troublemaker within the Raiders locker room. A nice reset. He had good production, better than Amari Cooper, but he dropped a lot of passes, and that's been an issue for Crabtree. He's a little inconsistent. So at 7.69, I would not be surprised if see Oakland say, you know what, there's no dead money. See ya, Crabtree. Thanks for your time here, but we're going to go look elsewhere for wide receiver help.
So there he is in the cap savings. Not too bad either. Michael Crabtree, perhaps a name to watch out for this NFL offseason. Let's take a look at our next name on the list, Brandon Marshall, wide receiver for the New York Giants. He barely played in 2017, Tom.
He's gone.
Yeah.
And he might not play in the NFL next year because Brandon Marshall is nowhere near the player he once was. And even when he played for the Giants, he was awful. Like, it was very clear he was, at best, the number 3 receiver on the New York Giants. Probably 4th if you include Evan Ingram. By the way, he played late in the year. And guys like Rock Lewis might have been better than Brandon Marshall. Like, he didn't bring anything to New York. He had a terrible year before he went down. $6.15 million cap hit. Save all but $1 million. See ya.
I like that.
He's not coming back. Now, Marshall's a very bright career as a media member, so maybe he retires and goes to that lucrative field, but he is not coming back with the Giants next year. It makes zero sense for them to do that.
All right, especially with Sterling Shepard and Odell Beckham Jr. coming back at wide receiver as well. So there's Brandon Marshall. We got one more name to get to here at the wide receiver position, and this guy I am going to have fun talking about, Dez Bryant. Should the Cowboys cut him, Tom?
No, because it doesn't make enough sense. And I'm very still confused as to why you think Dallas should do it.
Because I think from a symbolic standpoint,
I
said this on my show.
No,
need to move on from the Dez Bryant era. From a monetary standpoint, I understand your contentions because you have that
doesn't make
money.
sense from an on-field perspective either.
Well, what if they go out and they see an opportunity with Emmanuel Sanders, or maybe Bryce Butler could be that guy?
Stop it. Don't you dare bring up Bryce Butler again. I'm tired of dealing with that on the Cowboys
Hey, somebody
report.
in the YouTube commenters was
Bryce
saying
Butler
that.
sucks. He's not any good. He had a higher drop rate than Dez Bryant. There's a reason no one wants to play him. Anyway, with Dez Bryant, if you had an actual other option at receiver, I would actually give it some thought. But right now you've got Terrence Williams, who is awful. You've got Ryan Switzer, who was a slot guy and didn't play all that much. You've got an aging Jason Witten. You've got Bryce Butler, who dropped more passes on a per-catch basis than Dez Bryant did by a pretty significant factor. You've got Cole Beasley, who's a slot guy and also wasn't as good this year. You've got Noah Brown, who's a raw number 4, number 5 receiver. With Dez Bryant, yes, you can save 8.5 by cutting him. What receiver can you get that is better than Dez Bryant for that amount of money?
That's not what it's all about, though, Tom.
But it is about that.
But it's not, because you have Stephen Jones, the executive vice president of this freaking franchise, saying Dez Bryant is a distraction. Do you want a distraction in the locker room? Can you put a price on distraction?
Yeah, well, Zeke was a distraction this year. Do you want to cut Zeke now, too?
Well, perhaps not. But
there you go, see? So, yeah, Dez was a bit of a distraction because he's always yelling in the silence because he's a very fiery and passionate player. But, like, there's no better option for the Cowboys. I know he's a distraction at times. Cool. Like, you're not going to get a better guy for $8.5 million. If you're going to say the $12.5, well, you can't use that in free agency. So at that point, why would you want to cut Dez Bryant and make your team worse? And I don't buy the symbolism.
Come on.
You do not make personnel decisions based on symbolism when you're trying to win.
This is literature class, all right? We're talking symbolism.
When you're trying to win, you don't make decisions in that fashion. So if you're the Cowboys, you try and get Dez to take a pay cut back to this reaction poll.
Yep.
But you can't just say, yeah, we're going to cut him, and then like, ooh, we got an extra 8.5. Ooh, we can get, Marquise Lee. Yay. You can reach for a receiver in round one.
Dontrell Inman.
Because Calvin Ridley's not going to be there for you in the first round.
Okay.
So you keep Dez Bryant for a year. You can maybe even add a fake year to the end of his deal and restructure the money to help lower his cap hit. But you keep or pay cut Dez Bryant. You do not cut him.
And he has mentioned that he will not take that pay cut, so it seems as though Dez Bryant probably going to stay with the Dallas Cowboys, but we shall see. Throw in your respective thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, as we summarize our names so far for potential salary cap casualties: Mike Glennon, Tyrod Taylor, Doug Martin, Adrian Peterson, Chris Ivory, DeMarco Murray, Latavius Murray, Jeremy Maclin, Randall, Cobb, and Jordy Nelson are the next names here, as you see it on your screen now. And then the next slate: Emmanuel Sanders, Demaryius Thomas, Michael Crabtree, Brandon Marshall, and one Dez Bryant, a name we will continue to talk about as we go throughout the NFL offseason.
Don't cut him.
Don't cut him, Tom Downey says.
I'm fine with overhauling positions, but you got to have a plan. And there's no better plan, unfortunately, now for the Cowboys than Dez Bryant.
It's always a great plan to go onto comfortable.af for these fantastic sweat-wicking technology, advanced performance fabric shirts. Missing in Maine, sponsoring today's NFL Daily.
I was not ready for that one.
You were not ready.
That was a good one.
You set it up nicely. I'm getting claps from the co-workers behind the scenes. You know what? I'll take that as a W right there. So Missing in Maine, sponsoring NFL Daily here today. Many thanks to them for coming along for the ride. Let's go into the tight end position now as a potential salary cap cut. And, well, there's Eric Ebron. Weird situation here, Tom?
It is weird because he's got an $8.25 million cap hit, all of which can be saved. That's top 10 tight end money. That production is not top 10 tight end worthy. That's not at all. So it's a weird situation for the Lions and Ebron because they really tried to make him their tight end, and they tried to do the same thing with Brandon Pettigrew, and that didn't work out. And it just hasn't been good enough for Detroit. So I think what you end up doing here with Ebron is maybe you try and trade him. But I think maybe you just say, let's just eat the $8.25 million, or maybe you try and extend him and get that cap hit to go down. You keep him at a lesser money over, let's say, 3 or 4 years. A different route there. Maybe not one that you expected on today's show camp.
Certainly not, but a new regime there in Detroit, too, with Matt Patricia, so who knows what can happen with that. So there's Eric Ebron as a potential salary cap cut. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball now. Muhammad Wilkerson, lineman for the Jets.
He gone, and rightfully so, because Mo Wilkerson pulled an Albert Hainsworth. He got paid and he's like, I'm done. I'm just going to chill. I'm not going to do anything. 3.5 sacks, 2.2 tackles for loss, and he's got a $20 million cap hit this offseason. He gone. He was inactive to end the year. There is no way Wilkerson comes back, especially at that price. And I saw some questions on recent shows about, could the Jets trade him? No one wants that contract.
No.
No one wants it. I mean, you would have to do a Brock Osweiler type deal, which why would you do? Because you can cut him and save all but $3 million. So it's going to be a post-June 1st cut. They'll save $17 million, roll it over to next year as well. By the way, his salary fully guarantees for this year at the start of the new league year.
Okay.
He is not coming back. He will be cut without a doubt, and frankly, I'm kind of surprised it hasn't already happened.
Fair enough. I'm sure it's being talked about in the Jets front office, and the Jets already have a lot of salary cap space projected for 2018 and could get more thanks to this cut here. So there's Muhammad Wilkerson. Let's talk about this guy here, Robert Quinn, who's been a big-time disappointment, Tom, for a few years now.
And he's a little bit better this year. He had 8.5 sacks, but he's got a $12.4 million cap hit. I don't necessarily love his fit in Wade Phillips' defense, although it's good enough, but $12.4 million cap hit, all but $1 million of which can be saved. This was very much on the I'm not as sold as I want a guy like Mo Wilkerson side, but I think for that amount of savings, I think you go ahead and cut him when you got to re-sign guys like LaMarcus Joyner and maybe Tremaine Johnson. You got to free up money elsewhere. I think you'll see the Rams invest a lot of draft capital this offseason in terms of the defensive line and secondary. Also watch for Mark Barron. He could also be a cap cut for the Rams.
The Rams have a couple of decisions to make with some free agents, Tremaine Johnson, Sammy Watkins, etc. So may need to free up some space there to make it happen. All right, so there's Robert Quinn there for the Rams. Let's take a look at this guy, Tamaha of the Kansas City Chiefs. This might be a situation, Tom, where he just retires.
Look, it was a very weird offseason for Tamba because things didn't really make a whole lot of sense. There was just this whole weird scenario where Tamba wasn't like fully committed to showing up, and then one point that he tried to sort of requested a trade from the Kansas City Chiefs, and then ended up all being all fine there. We'll get to Cushing later. We'll get back to Tamba Ali here now on screen. When it comes to Ali, a $1 million roster bonus due on March 1st. I don't think he sees that. He was limited to 5 games this year, a $9.4 million cap hit, 7.7 of which can be saved. He's not going to come back at that point, and at his age, it might be a career for him.
And certainly a great career at that, one of the better Chiefs in recent memory. So there's Tamaha there. Let's go into our next name, Brian Cushing, linebacker of the Houston Texans.
He done. And it might not just be from the Texans. I think his career might be over because he was limited to 5 games amidst the suspension. Look, he does steroids. Let's call it what it is. He uses PEDs.
He juices.
He juices, and if you want to stereotype based on that, Cushing was not a surprise. He's been busted before. $8.8 million cap. The Texans have properly replaced him at inside linebacker. Cushing will not be back with Houston. 7.6 savings there. He's gone. He's not coming back. I'd actually be a little bit surprised if anyone ends up signing Brian Cushing, if anyone takes a shot on him. I just don't think it makes much sense. Why take a risk on a guy who, frankly, hasn't been that good for the past few years anyway?
So Brian Cushing there as a name to watch out for this offseason as a potential salary cap cut. Let's take a look at our summary here so far. Back from the top, Mike Glennon, Tyrod Taylor, Doug Martin, Adrian Peterson, Chris Ivory. Some names to watch on that offensive side as we continue on that side of the ball with DeMarco Murray, LATAVIUS Murray, Jeremy Maclin, Randall Cobb, and Jordy Nelson, followed by these guys. A few wide receivers here, Emmanuel Sanders, Demaryius Thomas, Michael Crabtree, Brandon Marshall, and Dez Bryant. Followed by these guys, Eric Ebron, Muhammad Wilkerson, Robert Quinn, Tamaha and Brian Cushing.
Cushing gone.
There you go. As we chug along here in our segment, taking a look at the secondary now. Aqib Talib, corner of the Broncos. This one makes a lot of sense.
Denver's been trying to trade him because they can't eventually afford both Chris Harris, Talib, and Roby, and one of the receivers, and also probably Kirk Cousins. So
exactly.
they got to save space this offseason for a new quarterback. And Talib with a $12 million cap hit, $11 million of which can be saved, kind of seems like the odd man out. They've been trying to trade him. They reportedly included him in a deal for Alex Smith. The Chiefs said, nah, we're going to go with this other deal from the Redskins because they're giving us a younger corner on a much better contract because the Redskins are stupid. But with Talib, I think he'll be cut and he'll get a starting job somewhere, but not quite at a $12 million cap hit. And frankly, I think there are some concerns around the NFL about Talib's attitude at times because he seems to have found himself in trouble. He gets in arguments with Michael Crabtree all the time.
Yep.
I don't know if teams necessarily want to bring that into the locker room, especially at a $12 million price tag.
So there he is as a top player to get cut this NFL offseason. As you mentioned, Denver needs to create some space in the salary cap category to make a run at things at Kirk Cousins. Let's stay in the back end here. Talk about Richard Sherman, corner of the Seahawks. He has been vocal. He wants to stay with Seattle. He thinks he will. Weird thing here I mentioned this morning, Tom. He's representing himself in all
Yeah,
this.
which is really weird because I never like it when a player doesn't have an agent because it's often a sign of a guy who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Says, I don't need an agent. I don't want to pay that 5 whatever percent. 2%.
Waste of money.
I'm just going to represent myself. Here's where it gets weird because Seattle's going to come to Sherman and say, hey, can you do a pay cut? And Sherman's going to be like, how dare you? How dare you think I need a pay cut? And instead of having to go through the agent, it's directly like, hey, Richard, we don't think you're worth this much. And that can lead to some fraying of the relationship.
Friction, yep.
At the same time, maybe Seattle doesn't even go to Sherman. They don't have to deal with him, and they just say, let's just, it's fine. We'll just pay him. Let's not risk burning the bridge. So it's all very more tentative dance than it normally is. So when it comes to Sherman, coming off the Achilles injury, an $11 million cap savings, that's a lot for him. And I know he's Richard Sherman, but I wouldn't be all that surprised if Seattle says, you know what? $11 million. We need that money for offensive line and other stuff.
Sure.
See ya. And he gets cut and he goes to somewhere like Miami.
And not a great salary cap situation right now for Seattle as well. One of the worst situations out there in the entire NFL. So they got to free up some space and perhaps address that line.
And coming off the injury, you can't trade him. No one's going to take on $13 million, or it's going to be $11 million in terms of what the new team would pay. $11 million for a player who we don't know how healthy he is right now. So I don't think you're going to see Sherman get traded.
Richard Sherman, the Legion of Boom, and all this in Seattle, and of course that big-time Super Bowl run a few years ago, Tom. Now, is he still a number 1 corner? That is the big question for everybody watching the program right now. Hit us up in the comments section. Tom, I'll ask you.
If we define number 1 by 32 or better, then yes. If we define a true number 1 lockdown corner, there aren't that many of those left in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Sherman coming off the injury can be that. I'd still take a chance on him, but not at $11 million base salary. Yeah. That's just too much.
It's all relative to the money, and right now, no thanks. At least if you're Seattle, in my eyes. All right, let's go to Adam Jones now, corner of the Cincinnati Bengals. Is it time, Tom?
I mean, it probably should have been time last year when he got arrested again, because Adam Jones is like the NFL's ultimate troublemaker. Like, that's just who he is. He is always finding himself in trouble, always getting himself into issues, and he was hurt this year, only played in 9 games. He's 34 years old. You can say almost all of his contract by cutting him. William Jackson is now your number 1 corner in Cincinnati. You've got Drake Kirkpatrick. You've got Darqueze Dennard. You don't need Adam Jones. You cut Jones and you say, you know what, thanks for the memories, Adam, but go ahead and hit the bricks.
You know who had a great year, by the way? William Jackson.
He was awesome.
He was great.
He is really good.
Future right there of the secondary.
Underrated because he plays in Cincinnati and no one pays attention, but Jackson is really good. The third.
So I'm sure Cincinnati won't feel too bad if they do indeed cut Adam Jones there. Let's go to the Bay Area now. Sean Smith and the Oakland Raiders may part ways here, Tom. They've already done it with one of their corners.
You know, if you had asked me this even like 2 months ago, I said Smith is gone. There's no way he comes back at an $8.5 million
no dead money.
But down the stretch, he didn't look as bad. He looked a little bit more like the guy the Raiders thought they were getting from the Kansas City Chiefs when they originally signed him. So with Sean Smith, I'll say that it's not quite as a done deal. With that said, there are some major off-the-field issues currently surrounding Sean Smith that I think kind of got overlooked as the year went on. So back in July, he was arrested for assaulting his sister's then boyfriend. He was arraigned recently, and 3 days before the finale is actually when he got arraigned. So what happened was, per 2 witnesses that testified during the preliminary hearing, they saw a man identified as Sean Smith stomping the head of his sister's then boyfriend as he laid bleeding and unconscious on a street. Now, the victim had a metal plate and screws inserted under his right eye, had surgery to fix his left eye socket to repair 5 facial fractures, and also suffered a torn ACL. So a lot of bad stuff going on around Sean Smith as he faces a pending assault trial. Probably suspension at some point as well once that investigation is completed. So with Sean Smith, the Raiders might not have much of a choice but to cut him, because even though he played better, the off-the-field stuff is going to be a big concern for him.
So Sean Smith could be on the chopping block, of course, with the new regime there and John Gruden as the head coach. Let's go to another name here at the corner position, and he has stolen some pretty negative headlines, Eli Apple.
So in most cases, you're never, ever going to cut a cornerback this early in the year here, as a rookie cornerback this early because it just doesn't make any sense to do so. Because you have so much dead money that you have to do. So normally a $4 million cap is what Eli Apple has. If he was cut straight up, it'd be that $4 million plus an extra $4 million in dead money because a rookie contract is fully guaranteed. Even post June 1st, it's negative 2.5 on top of that $4 million. But he was suspended to end the season, and that suspension could allow the Giants to void his contract. And if that's the case, there's no more guaranteed money. That's how you can allow the Giants to cut Eli Apple, who, for all purposes, was without a doubt a huge locker room cancer last year for New York. He was a major problem for the Giants. And I think with the new regime, it might be, you know what, Eli? We're done with you. We're not dealing with you anymore. We don't want to have to deal with you being this gigantic head case anymore. You're done. We're going to move on from you altogether. But new regime will say, you know what?
Pat Shermer.
Let's give him a shot.
Yep.
Let's give him one more chance, then we can try and cut him. So I don't know where we end up going with Eli Apple, a former top 10 overall pick, but at this point, Giants got to get him in order here because he is a mess right now. He really has to get himself figured out because he was a huge issue for the Giants throughout the year. He was a big locker room cancer.
So Eli Apple, perhaps on the chopping block from the New York Giants. And there you go. He's our final name in our list of potential salary cap cuts. One more time, let's go through all 25 players. Mike Glennon, Tyrod Taylor, Doug Martin, Adrian Peterson, Chris Ivory. Tom, your picks here, you might swipe the board on that first sheet.
Yeah, I feel very confident. The one that gives me some pause is Tyrod Taylor because he might be traded instead.
Yes.
But I think all those guys are on new teams next year unless Taylor takes another pay cut.
The next five here, DeMarco Murray, LATAVIUS Murray, Jeremy Maclin, Randall Cobb, and Jordy Nelson. Those two at the bottom there, Tom, it's going to be one or the other.
Yeah, we won't get both right. We think that the Packers will keep one of them and probably cut a different receiver. But one of those guys for Green Bay probably won't be back next year.
Two wideouts for the Packers, two wideouts for the Broncos. Emmanuel Sanders, Demaryius Thomas, Michael Crabtree, Brandon Marshall, and Dez Bryant. Is Dez gone?
No.
Okay.
Stop doing this. You're riling up the commenters. Now I got to deal with it again on tomorrow's Cowboys
I will
report.
speak it into existence. The next five here, Eric Ebron, Mohamed Wilkerson, Robert Quinn, Tom Ali, and Brian Cushing. Some of these guys here have different paths. Ali probably could be retirement. Cushing is just,
might be out of the league altogether. And Wilkerson, I mean, who wants them right now after the way he pulled an Albert Ainsworth?
Yeah.
He got his big money contract and totally shut down.
All right, and then we have the secondary now, a slew of corners, Aqib Talib, Richard Sherman, Adam Jones, Sean Smith, and Eli Apple. My theory here with the Broncos and trading Aqib Talib, you read a lot of the reports that GMs out there are saying, well, we know they're going to cut him anyway. Why waste any picks and trade for this guy who's 32?
That's happened for a lot of the guys. We went through some players who could be traded, but oftentimes NFL teams aren't able to trade guys because why would you give up a draft pick and more money when you can sign a guy for no draft pick and less money? So that's where you kind of fit. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering where Cam Chancellor is, his salary is fully guaranteed. He will not be cut by the Seahawks. He is here to stay.